Welcome to Create by T. I recently had a relative that was getting rid of a vintage box spring bed and was able to save the springs for me for some craft projects. So today I'm going to tell you 8 different crafts that you can do with vintage bed springs. For the first craft, I took this faux pumpkin I had from last year and I glued it on to the top of the spring. I then took some wire that was coated with twine from the Dollar Tree and I wrapped it around the top of the stem and gave it a little curly cue. I also tucked in some green faux leaves to add a little bit of texture to this craft. For the second craft was very simple. I took a stem of these sunflowers and just stuck it down in the center of the spring and then took this blue velvet ribbon and made a bow. For the third idea, I purchased a set of 2 of these hanging light kits. I strung one end through the spring and tightened it into the top of the spring. The light is tight enough in the spring that it is staying put. Simply add this onto a bracket for a cheap and inexpensive light. For my fourth project, I'm going to take 2 springs and intertwine them into each other towards the top. Next, I will take some twine and join the 2 at the top with the twine, tying a knot. Once that is done, I will take each side of the twine and I will loop it back down the center of each spring. I have a jingle bell for each end of the twine, and I will add the jingle bell with a little knot on each side of the spring. Once that is done, I will trim the excess twine off of each jingle bell. Next, I have this red and white striped ribbon, and I will make a bow for the top. After fluffing the bow, I will cut the tails of the ribbon and then attach it to the top of my 2 bed springs, creating Christmas jingle bells. I add twine for a hanger and then I added it to this wreath. For my 5th project, I am taking a styrofoam ball that came in a pack of 3 from the Dollar Tree and some of this Gorilla Wall Repair, and I am smearing it all over the styrofoam ball just to create some texture. Next, I am using some paint that I have in my stash. It's just a little bit of an off-white, and I'm going to dab this over the styrofoam ball that we used so that it's not quite so bright white. I found this little doll hat for 50 cents at the thrift store, and I thought it would make a good snowman hat. Also, for the nose of the snowman, I took a piece of pool noodle and just cut sort of a pyramid triangle shape. Then I took an orange Sharpie marker and colored it in and glued it to the center of the styrofoam ball for the snowman's nose. Once that was finished, I attempted to do the eyes with a black Sharpie. It wasn't showing up very well, so I did just take some black acrylic paint with a tiny paintbrush and dabbed 2 dots on for his eyes. Next, I took my hot glue gun and I glued the little doll hat onto the styrofoam ball for the snowman's hat. Next, I took 2 small buttons. You can get these in a little plastic jar from the Dollar Tree. I picked 2 of the smallest ones and attached them with my glue gun to the spring. For his scarf, I took a piece of homespun fabric and tied it around right under the styrofoam ball. And this is how he turned out. For my 6th and 7th project, I am using some terracotta pieces. I began by painting this terracotta base and this tiny little terracotta pot. I painted them white and then added some Waverly antiquing wax to give them a little bit of an aged and distressed look. On the tiny pot, I took some stamps and I am stamping the word Noel across the rim of the little pot. Next, I am adding some of my clear Gorilla Glue to the top of the spring. Then I'm going to add my little terracotta pot into the spring, making sure it is snug. Next, I am adding some of this green moss to the little pot. First, I did add a little bit of glue to keep the moss staying put in the little pot. After that, I glued this little Christmas tree, bottle brush tree into the pot, and this is how it turned out. Back to my 7th craft that I had started to show you. I purchased these wooden stars from Hobby Lobby during their 4th of July clearance sale. I took some Waverly antiquing wax and I waxed the front and the back of this little star and set it off to the side to dry. I glued the base of the spring with some Gorilla Glue into the bottom of the terracotta plate. And then I added some Gorilla Glue to the back of the wooden star and placed it towards the top of the spring. While the wooden star was drying, I took some Elmer school glue and I added it to the base of the terracotta pot and brushed it on with a sponge brush. Then I added some of this moss inside to the base of that little pot. And this is how the little vintage bed spring Christmas tree turned out. For my 8th and final project, I took some small craft clothespins and I added a vintage picture to the top, making these as a little photo display. Let me know in the comments below which project was your favorite, and thanks for joining me.